What are some scary, horrifying, creepy things that have happened to you, or in general, that could have a plausible explanation, but still freak you out? One time, I drove back to college after Christmas but before the winter break was over, so I was the first of my roommates to get back to the house we were renting. Our house was in a pretty isolated spot on the outskirts of a town in upstate New York. I pulled into the driveway behind the house, went to the trunk and grabbed one of my bags and then ran inside because I had to use the bathroom so badly. I'd been on the road for over 5 hours. I was inside the house using the bathroom for maybe 5 minutes. Afterwards, I went back outside to get the rest of my stuff from the car. And there were footprints in the snow all around it. Now, as I said, I was alone in the middle of nowhere. The only set of footprints should have been mine from where I'd gotten out of the car on the driver's side, walked to the trunk, and then walked to the back door. Yet now, there was another set of footprints circling the car, and then leading into the woods at the back of the property. It appeared that the footprints had originally come from the woods as well. I had left my trunk open when I was inside because I'd assumed I was alone, and nothing had been taken. But someone had seen me arrive, come out of the woods, circled my car, and returned to the woods. I grabbed the rest of my shit, locked my car, ran into the house, and locked the doors. Moved into a cottage on the mountain. My backyard was a tree line. The moon lit everything so beautifully well, it hardly seemed like night at all. I began having recurring dreams. It was the same dream every single time. In my dream I would see myself laying asleep in my bed and then it switched from third-person view to first-person view. In the dream, I awoke to a whispering female voice. The thirst hit me. In the dream it was unbearable. I would climb out of bed, open the French doors, and head to the kitchen sink to get a glass of water. As I neared the sink, the voice would get louder and louder but I still couldn't make it out. It was as if it were a foreign language but not one that I had heard before nor since. Then, standing in my kitchen and looking out the window right above the sink to the tree line in my backyard well lit by the moon's light, the voice suddenly became clear. She said, "The devil is in the woods." At this point a shadow darted quickly behind the tree line. I would then wake up from my dream, standing in my kitchen in the exact spot that I was in the dream. This happened almost every week for the entire duration of time that I lived in that house. It also always happened close to or right at 3 a.m. Mine's even weirder. When I was younger, my mom came from her ancestral home taking home some trinkets and 2 paintings of 2 people apparently from our family. Anyway, after that, every night at around 11 p.m. I would hear people talking outside my room. I just dismissed it as someone watching TV or something. But one night my parents left and I had to babysit my sis. We were chilling in my room when I heard the talking again. Then my sister goes, "Can you check if the TV is on? We're the only ones here." Now I'd what to think. Apparently she started assuming the same thing as I did and have been experiencing the same thing since the paintings came. Told my mom afterwards and she brought them back to their ancestral house. My sister and I could just suffer joint hallucinations but still. Personally, I've had an extremely strange experience and I don't know whether to chalk it up to my 12-year-old brain at the time, or if it actually was of the paranormal nature. My best childhood friend used to live in this house that was technically 2 houses merged into one, both were very old. The first night that I ever slept over, he told me about how a woman who lived in one of the houses lost her mind one day and drowned her children in a basin in the back, many years ago. It was around 4 a.m. and I woke up in the middle of the night needing a drink of water. I came out of his bedroom, passing the staircase that leads to the 2nd floor on my right, and walked out into the kitchen. On my way back to his room, for some reason I stopped dead in my tracks at the foot of the stairs, which I hadn't really been looking at in my haste to make it back to his room. I turned my head to look at them, and instead of a staircase leading up to the 2nd floor there was a set of stairs going downwards on an intense angle, into what looked like nothingness. It was pitch black. I stood there for what felt like 20 minutes, just gazing into this abyss that was before me, that wasn't there before. My brain didn't even register it as strange. That's when I heard an ear-piercing, it sounded like it came from inside of my head, woman's voice scream no. Needless to say, I booked it back to his room and I haven't really said anything about it since it happened. The weird thing is that I can remember it like it was yesterday, even though so many years have passed and I've probably forgotten about more important events since then. Just thought I'd share. I've shared this on Reddit before. I believe that I lived in a haunted apartment. It was a 3-bedroom 2-bathroom row home near the professional/graduate schools, and the owner was a dentist who bought it so his kids could live there when they were in school and once they were out, rented it at a great rate to other students. The important context here is that there were a lot of residents cycling in and out. He would post ads for single bedrooms and have the prospects meet the current tenants, and each was on their own lease, so some people stayed for a couple years while others filtered out each school year. Also, all of the tenants were young professionals or graduate students, not partying college kids but late 20s early 30s. Many would move out into their first home with their soon-to-be spouse. So, why was it haunted? 1. Sometimes you would come downstairs and all of the cabinets would be open. Some people have suggested sleepwalking or nocturnal wandering for snacks, but it happened with a variety of different people and no single person was consistently in the house each time it happened. Others have suggested that the building was slanted and it was gravity, but some doors opened in opposite directions, so that doesn't seem plausible. Also, except for times when all of them opened, they seemed to stay shut just fine. 2. The back door was a sliding glass door leading to a small fenced yard, as row homes have, and once one of the roommates called me over. There were hundreds, maybe 1,000s, of large black flies flying into the glass, hard enough that you heard the pinging. This went on for a while until most of them were lying on the ground stunned or dead. The remaining couple flew away and we went outside and swept up a dustpan full of flies. The plausible explanation is that they were fleeing a predator, which may be true, but it still was bizarre. 3. There were random leaks in the roof, but oddly enough they didn't seem tied to rain, snow, or any other weather. They just happened. Also, they dripped like water and left water stains on the ceiling, but if you put a bucket underneath to catch it, it was this sticky brown tar. The landlord had professionals take a look twice while I lived there, and told me he had it looked at a couple times before I had moved in, and they never found anything to fix. The plausible explanation is that moisture was getting in somehow and it was picking up tack or building material and washing it out. I've also heard that past cigarette use will cause tar to weep out of walls with moisture, but again, it was just sort of odd how it happened. 4. The cat. When I moved in, 2 couples were moving out and a bachelor was still living there. He had a cat, which was awesome. It was giant and if you tried to pick it up it would never scratch, but it would do everything in its power to get down, and then it would walk away and give you side-eye. Anyways, a month after I moved in, the cat's owner told me he was moving out. He left, but he left the cat in the house. I made sure it had food and water but it never seemed to touch it. It mostly hid and that was fine. A week later one of the other past tenants came to pick up stuff and I told them the cat was still there, and they both looked at each other and sort of sighed about how the guy had 2 cats, one he took care of and one that just lurked in the basement, and how he lied to the landlord about the second cat, etc. 2 weeks later the guy comes back to get the last of his stuff and I mention the cat, and he gets really angry and huffy and tells me that he only has 1 cat and it's already gone. But the thing was, myself and the people who moved in kept seeing the cat and hearing it at night, but it never ate any food we left out and the house had a pest control treatment for mice at one point, but we still saw the cat. The plausible explanation is that a neighbor had a cat and they are wily things. But it is really weird that so many people saw it but no one ever caught it or stopped it from coming and going. At one point we had a roommate who rescued an abused pit bull, and the dog was really skittish, and it never seemed to react to a cat being there, even though it freaked out at animals it saw on walks. So, that is the haunted apartment and all the plausible explanations. I should note that nothing bad ever happened to me there. When I was like 4 or 5, I remember waking up one day in the early hours of the morning. It was still dark outside, and I groggily made my way to my parents' room, expecting them to still be asleep. When I opened the door, the room was fully lit, my parents were nowhere in sight, and there was a man and a woman I don't recognize on the bed. The following events are pretty hazy in my memory, but basically they seemed surprised, and one of them asked something along the lines of "Who's he?" to the other. Still too sleepy and young to process anything, I just closed the door, went back to my room and fell asleep again. When I woke up in the morning, my parents were there, and the day continued as normal. I've never seen those 2 people again, and until now I'm still wondering if I had a supernatural encounter, or if it's just a really vivid dream I had as a child. A lady's voice coming from my closet asking for help. My closet door was cracked and she said, "Help me. I see you through the cracks." Every synonym for the word scared was coursing through my body. I went and checked to see if there was a woman in need of help, but nothing was in there but my clothes and shoes. When I was 12, my family lived in a house that had a very large pond behind it. Think less of a pond and more of a very small lake. So when we first moved to this house, the neighbor's son was always out at the pond fishing. When I would talk to him, he would swear that there was an absolutely huge catfish in the pond. He really wanted to catch it but was never able to. He said he knew that it was there because he had seen it eat some of the baby ducks and geese that lived there. He watched them get sucked down under the water while swimming on the surface. I thought it was interesting that a fish could eat baby ducks, but never really gave it a second thought. Neighbor's son eventually moved out. He never did catch the catfish. After living there a few years, I was probably around 16, I finally saw what my neighbor's son was fishing for, or at least saw its effects. My friend was spending the night, just hanging out playing video games all night on some random weekend, when we heard the ducks on the pond completely losing their shit. This was around midnight and normally we didn't hear the ducks inside, so we had to see what was going on. At first we didn't notice anything. It just seemed like the ducks were going crazy every once in a while for no reason. Around 10 to 20, we had a lot of ducks and geese on this pond. One day my dad counted like 300, would fly off the pond for a little while and then come back down the whole time freaking out. Then we noticed it. Ducks were being pulled under. We watched as several ducks were pulled under the surface by something, and all the ducks around it would flip the f*** out and move away from that spot. It was insane. I have seen ducks dive for food before and this was not that. They would kind of struggle as they were being pulled down, throwing their wings and head up as they went down. It seemed like something was grabbing their legs and pulling them down. And let me clarify, these were not baby ducks. These were full-grown adult ducks being pulled under and not resurfacing. Next day we told everyone and very few people believed us, as these things usually go. Never really saw anything like it again, and had stopped thinking about it until one night something happened. Cool summer night, window open, playing a game on my Nintendo SP, when I heard something outside. It sounded like someone with big sloshy wet boots was stomping through mud. I was sitting on my bed next to the window looking at my SP when I first heard the sound. It sounded like, whatever it was walking down the fence line to the pond. I jumped off my bed to go look out the window. When I looked out I saw what I can barely describe. At the end of our fence, about 20 feet away from the pond, was this giant brown and black mass of something. The size of it was around a small car and it was rounded, kinda like Cousin It, with two shiny black eyes near the top. It was looking right at me. As soon as my eyes met its I collapsed with fear. I have never felt anything near that level of fear before in my life. One time I almost died from car surfing, and the fear I felt then was a drop in a bucket to what I felt when my eyes looked into whatever it was. I laid there on the floor, unable to move, unable to breathe, and listened to the creature walk to the pond. I heard splashing and that was it. I laid there for what seemed like hours and eventually moved to my bed and stayed awake in fear all night. Just stared at the window. No idea what it was. I think about it often. My family owns an AFC home for developmentally disabled adults. My family sleeps on the first level of the house and the residents sleep on the second level above us. Ever since I was a little girl, I would always wake up every single night at around 3 a.m. to the sound of furniture being dragged around on the floor above me. Like really heavy sounding furniture dragging in odd patterns. Of course it freaked me out when I was younger, but as I got a bit older I just assumed one of the residents was just moving their chair around, maybe due to OCD or something. I wrote it off. Anyways, flash forward, I'm 17 years old and one of our residents moves out. So a bedroom way bigger than mine opens up upstairs. My current bedroom was a small office space, barely big enough to fit my bed, so clearly I jump on the opportunity to move upstairs. I'm excited as fuck and settle into my new room for the first night. Then I wake up at 3 a.m. to the sound of heavy furniture being dragged around on the floor above me. And I'm on the second floor. The sound was coming from our attic. My house is infamous among friends and family members for being haunted. There's so many stories I could tell. This one just really irks me because our attic is the scariest place I've ever seen, and sometimes I swear someone is living up there. In 2014 I was living in Southern California in a 2-bedroom apartment that was on the second floor. Both my husband and I are Marines, but he was out on a boat for a few weeks, so I was home alone with our 2 cats. One night at around 1 a.m., I am woken by my cats doing that scared cat noise. You know, that high-pitched scream that is just unsettling. I open my eyes and look to the foot of my bed where my cats sleep. They are both leaned to the right of the bed and hissing towards the left of the bed. I follow their eyes and see this enormous shadowy figure, kinda just lurking at the corner of my bed. This freaks me the f*** out and I immediately hop out of bed, on the far side away from whatever that is. It takes me less than a second to leap out of bed, but when I turn to fight it's gone. My cats are now in my bedroom doorway searching for it. I work up the courage to go investigate and discover that whatever was in my home is now gone. Needless to say, I didn't go back to sleep that night and my cat stood guard at my bedroom door for the next few nights. Now the plausible explanation. I kept the balcony door slightly open for my cats to go use their litter box. It rarely rains in SoCal and the weather is wonderful 24/7, it very well could have been an animal, but what animal is brave enough to go into a bedroom where they can smell other cats and a human? The shadow itself seemed large, but like it was crouching at the corner of my bed, just peeking up. It could have been a human, but I would have heard it run away considering how quick it disappeared. To this day, I have no idea what was in my room and it freaks me out. Before my parents split up, we used to live in this huge old house. We lived in that old leaky house until I was about 14. The thought was to renovate the nearly 100-year-old house, but I guess life got in the way for my parents. The house had 2 floors, and all of our bedrooms was up on the second floor. The largest part of the second floor was dominated by the attic. It was a creepy attic, filled with discarded things from both our family and the previous owners. I knew the attic pretty well, because although I was terrified of it, me and my best friend would hide things we shouldn't have there. A stolen baseball bat, fireworks and other things 10-14-year-olds would hide from their parents. The attic had an old wooden door that had a key in it. The door was always locked unless someone was in there. My bedroom shared a wall with this attic. I had insomnia when I was a kid. Or at least the doctors told my parents it was insomnia. One of my biggest secrets is that I slept with a night light on, hiding under the covers and pillows until I was 14. I would strategize how I would sleep, and make it look like the bed was empty by sleeping under the mattress, or by having my head under the pillows. The reason? Almost every night I would hear stuff from the attic shift and move. It often sounded like somebody was rolling heavy balls, like bowling balls or the like across the floor in the attic. Sometimes I would hear knocks on the walls. Sometimes I heard what sounds like whispers. Me and my best friend would sometimes summon the courage to explore the attic in the daytime. Always with the door open, never alone. I was obsessed with finding the balls I heard rolling across the floor. The other sounds I could write off as sounds a house would make. But the rolling balls and the whispers were unexplained. We never found the rolling balls, or any other source that could explain it. I'm sure there could be a plausible explanation, but I never found one. I do not believe in the supernatural, but for some reason I still get scared thinking about it. We moved when I was 14, and the first night after we moved, I slept with all the lights off, head on the pillow. I have slept well since. I spoke with my mother about these things a couple of years ago. When I told her about the sounds, she grew a fearful expression and said she didn't want to talk about it anymore. When I was a little kid I heard my mom calling my name. I left the room and asked her what she wanted but she said she didn't call for me. I went back to the room and all the doors were ripped off my entertainment center and broken. I got punished for it but I refused to believe that somehow I hallucinated, blacked out, then gained the super strength of a dozen preschoolers. This happened on my first night alone in a new house. We lit candles in the living room, relaxed in there for a bit, then my husband went out for the evening and I put the kids to bed. Before doing so, I blew out all the candles as I wouldn't be in the room. And yes, I definitely blew them out because I'm paranoid about safety. After 30 minutes or so, I returned to the living room, and all the candles were lit again. I called my husband and told him to come home immediately because the house was haunted or someone was secretly living in a cupboard somewhere. He assured me that this can happen due to a breeze. I'm still not convinced. Once went on a drive with my girlfriend down some back roads where I grew up. I was telling her about this big swamp off the road that my family was convinced had supernatural properties, as we were coming up beside it. I parked my truck on the shoulder so that we could get out and take a closer look, when bam, my radio turns on full blast, creepy white noise with muffled voices that didn't sound like any sort of talk show. She screamed, I turned it off, we drove out of there. As a person that doesn't like to listen to anything but the sound of the road when I drive, I never turn on my radio. And in order to turn it on, you have to physically press the button. So yeah, it was pretty creepy, but probably just a weird electrical coincidence. In 2008, we renovated our house just after buying it. We painted the cabinet doors in the kitchen and laid them out to dry. When it came time to hang them, 2 were missing. We searched everywhere, but could not find them. I ordered replacements, but never got around to putting them up. We just got used to the middle 2 cabinets pretending to be shelves. About a year and a half ago, I decided to paint the replacement doors and put them up. I painted them, then got busy at work and never got around to putting them up. Less than a year ago, I searched everywhere, looking for the doors. I finally found them in the attic, leaning against the access in a way that caused them to fall out of the attic when I opened the access. I cannot remember the last time I went into the attic before then. My wife cannot even reach the access pull, so I know she didn't put them there. We still have not found the original doors, nor do we know how these got up there. Creepy. When I was in my early 20s, my then boyfriend and I lived in an old house that had since been turned into 4 apartments. We were one of 2 on the top floor. Our apartment was the only one with access to the attic of the house. That door was in our bathroom but was painted/sealed shut. We assumed because landlord didn't want anyone up there. Naturally we got it open and went up to check it out. Nothing out of the ordinary, just an empty/dusty attic. We had many odd occurrences in the year and a half we lived there. The scariest for me was one night I came home after closing at my job, so about 1 a.m. I arrived home and was home alone, changed and did a few things and headed to the bathroom before bed. As I am on the toilet, something slams into the door enough to shake it in its frame. I don't think I have ever moved that fast in my life. Jumped up and ran out of the room without even pulling my pants up, got redressed and headed to my parents' where I spent the night. The next day my dad and I go back after some calming down, thinking maybe an animal got in there somehow. We pry the door back open and go up to check it out. Nothing there, nothing to explain what it might have been, and had there been an animal or something we would have seen tracks, and the floor was covered in dust that was undisturbed. We used to hear what sounded like dragging sounds and odd things a lot in that house. I tried to research the address to see what I could find out about the history of the house but found nothing out of the ordinary.